And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out. Hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine. Only on the BetQL Network.
Hello and welcome into Tapped Out. As always, produced by Jake Noacker with my co-host Brendan Tobin. I am the sports machine, Sean Levine. And, well, we've been talking about UFC 294 for a while. And basically just erase everything that we talked about because we have to reset. This whole thing's been completely blown up. Charles Oliveira is now out at UFC 294. The main event is Islam Makhachev versus Alexander Volkanovski, part 2. BT, let's start there. We saw this the first time, and you and I both had money on Volkanovski essentially as a value bet, right? We were getting, do you remember what we were getting that night? Was it 4-1 on our money? Close to 5?
I think it was close. Yeah, I think it was close to 4-1.
And you look at Volk and you get close to 4 or 5-1. It doesn't matter if he's fighting a bear and a gorilla. You got to make that bet every time. And as it turns out, we both think that he won the fight against Islam. Now, it was very close. The judges ultimately said Islam won 3 rounds to 2. That's now over with. Going forward, do you think Alexander Volkanovski kind of figured something out the first time around that he can beat him coming up?
Well, I mean, we've seen this. This is interesting because, you know, he's got such an experience with consistent rematches because he's done it against Max Holloway, and we've seen him basically get better in every fight. So this is a really cerebral guy. You know, we were talking so much in the lead up to this card about Oliveira and Islam, and you kept asking me, but he's Charles Oliveira. Shouldn't he figure something out? And it was hard for me to get there just because of how dominant and one-sided the other fight was. This is such a different story because, like you said, a lot of people thought that Volk should have gotten his arm raised, you know, and he's been there. He's been on the other side of close decisions with Max Holloway where people thought maybe Max should have gotten the nod. But as we saw in progression with the rivalry, he gets smarter. He finds ways to make it look more impressive. And, you know, I think this one I think he's definitely got a better opportunity this time around, you know, and I imagine the odds will still be having him as an undercard. I think I saw him at like plus 200 on the odds. Jake just chimes in with, which is about right. Cause I think that, so you basically sliced him in half because people saw a better chance, but it is still a big ask cause he's going in on 11 days notice.
Yeah, now it sounds about right to me. Now Volk a 2-1 underdog, Islam minus 225. So I think the answer is pretty obviously yes. But if I was to ask you, does Volk present a bigger problem than Charles Oliveira? Is it a much bigger problem? Like, do you think that Islam is now shaking in his boots because he had all his number and he knows that it was damn close against Volkanovski?
I don't think he's shaking in his boots, but yeah, I mean, you're talking about, first of all, 2 completely different body types. You're talking about a guy who's really nearly impossible to submit in Alexander Volkanovski because of that giant dome with no room to get under that chin for a neck, as opposed to Charles Oliveira, you know, who has shown he can be gotten from time to time. So yeah, it's a completely different fight that he has to deal with. And the thing that's always interesting with Volk is he's just got a sneaky big reach for his height. So he's a really skilled boxer. He's been already in kind of the web that is Islam Makhachev and being able to get out of that and deal with the danger there. So I don't think he's going to have the mental edge on Volk. He's been there, done that with him. And I think Volk really does feel like he should have won that fight anyway, especially with how that fight ended. So I don't know who's going to have the mental edge in this one, but I think that for everybody feeling like it was an impossible task, like going into the first fight, we know that's not the case. I think the bigger question really is with this is what kind of shape is Volkanovski in? Has he been training? So is it crazy to say he could gas out a little bit in those later rounds? That would be my biggest question because we've never seen that be a problem for Volk. I don't know how hard he's been training. That's, you know, that I think we'll get more during fight week about how in shape he is for this.
Yeah, what are we talking about now? Less than 2 weeks notice. So we will see without a full training camp, although we're talking about Volk here. By the way, I've seen somebody get under his neck before, right? Brian Ortega almost squeezed his head off. And that's the scary part is Volk kept being like, nah, I'm good, mate. I swim with sharks. You can't choke me out. So we've seen people try. We've seen the best. And so far, it's been a long time since anybody's been able to beat that guy fair and square. All right, let's talk about the co-main event, which was supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev taking on Paulo Costa. Now we know that the co-main event has changed. Paulo Costa out, Khamzat Chimaev versus Kamaru Usman. It's a fight that we've been talking about now for a long, long time. And BT, it's funny because if we would have had this fight, we've been doing the show now for a little bit over 2 years, right? Two years and change, whatever you want to call it. And it feels like if you could, for a long time, say Usman will be the big favorite in this fight because he's Kamaru Usman, because he was the champion, because he defended the belt, and because he's fought and won against every style and the experience and all these different things. And the last couple of fights out, albeit against the champion Leon Edwards, Leon's won the fights. Now that we're actually going to see this take place coming up in a couple of weeks, we've got our questions about Chimaev. We haven't seen him in a while. What weight class does he fight at? Can he fight this elite of a fighter? Because this will be even a step up against, if you want to say the best he's fought is Gilbert Burns, and he's great. We know that we've seen Gilbert in the cage with Usman, and Usman beat him. So what I'm saying is, this is a very interesting fight, and I'm looking at the odds. Pick them. I'm not surprised.
Yeah, and I was just kind of browsing back at because this fight's been kicked around a while, but albeit at welterweight, about in 2021 when it was first mentioned, people had Khamzat at plus 170. Usman was minus 200. Then it got much closer around 2022. Yeah, just people look at it because you're right. It has been kicked around a bunch. At a point about a year ago, maybe a little a year and a half, it was Kamaru Usman minus 135, getting much closer with Chimaev being a slight dog in this one. But now you're moving up a weight class, and it is an interesting one to check out of what are we getting from Kamaru Usman, because he's going to a completely different weight class. He doesn't have to fight championship rounds, which is the first time I'm looking at this, the last time Kamaru Usman hasn't been in a scheduled championship or a main event fight, 2018. I mean, I think that there's some element of, how much has he been training? But also this guy's always had to go basically for championship rounds and train himself for championship rounds. Been a lot of questions about, is his body wearing down a little bit? I think not having to necessarily cut weight, not having to, put that strain on your body, it could be argued that maybe he comes into this thing a little bit fresher. I mean, there's no question who has the better resume, and you can't really say he's going up against a pure middleweight because we never really seen Chimaev at that in the UFC. So it's a fascinating fight, man. And honestly, I'm more intrigued by it than I am what was on here. I feel like we got a better card than we did a week ago.
Absolutely. Tons of questions on both sides coming in. I'm curious on fight night what the money looks like. Producer Jake, did you want to get in on this fight? Because this is one that we've been talking about now for a long, long time.
Yeah, and I never would have said this before the two Leon fights, but now that Usman is where he's at in his career with, trajectory and momentum, I don't know. You guys honestly think Khamzat's not going to go in there and just starch Usman and knock him out? That's how I see the fight going.
I don't know if he's going to – sounds like you think he's going to go in there and ragdoll him and maybe finish him, win the first cup. Do you really? No. I don't think that's –
I seriously think it's going to be bad, man. I think it's going to be bad.
Who's done that to Kamaru Usman? Who's done that to Usman?
No one. But who has Usman fought as young, as hungry, and skilled as Khamzat in the past 10 years? No one. He's been fighting old Colby Covington, Leon Edwards. But Colby's
when did Colby Covington get old? He fought Colby Covington 3 years ago. It's not like he took on a 40-year-old
plus.
We're a long time away from. I don't know, man. I mean, asking that. I mean, first of all, the idea that my peepers are going to have to see Kamaru Usman get ragdolled because never seen it. So the idea that you're going to see a Chimaev come in here and do that. He didn't ragdoll Gilbert Burns. I mean, that was a fight that was on the feet. And we've seen when he's gone grappler versus grappler, we've seen he can get the best on the hands. He starched Jorge Masvidal. Leon Edwards, he was kicking his ass up until 30 seconds left in a fight. So I don't know, man. I think the bigger question, I guess, for this is just, does it transfer as far as the grappling is concerned because of, his weight, but like we're here to believe like Kamaru Usman and his travels has never been training in the gym with middleweights before.
Where I agree with Jake, if this is agreeing with him, is I think a lot of the public money that night is going to come in on Khamzat Chimaev. I think that a lot of people are thinking kind of along the same lines as Jake, that at least at this point in their careers, now they're actually going to step into an octagon, and it's not just some guys talking about it on your radio, on YouTube, Odyssey app, however you're checking us out right now. I think a lot of people, including me, are thinking at this point in their careers, Khamzat is the better fighter. But I don't think he's going to ragdoll him. I don't think he's going to whoop his ass. BT, if you tell me right now, no, I think that Usman's experience is going to pay off or whatever, I mean, twist my arm and I'll bet on the Nigerian Nightmare. I don't feel that strongly about it. And I certainly, Jake, don't think that either side's going to go out there. It's not going to be done in one. I'll tell you that much.
Well, let me clarify, because ragdoll, I think, is a bad way to put how I feel. Ragdoll insinuates, in my opinion, that he's going to absolutely smoke him and control the fights for
toss him around the cage
until it's finished. That's not how I think this is going to go. I think he's going to get clipped. I think he's going to get starched, and I do think it's going to happen within one. I don't know if we're going to see the grappling. I don't know why I feel this way. I think Usman's going out inside of one round with the heavy shot.
That's one of my favorite bets to make, by the way, at BetMGM, if you can pin the tail on the donkey and get the fighter and the round. So for you that night, buddy, I'll lay down a little bit on, Khamzat Chimaev in the first round, and then just to upset BT, I'll put a little bit on Kamaru Usman to win the fight. You know how I do.
But just to play devil's advocate to this, what has Khamzat done? Like, why are we painting him as some boogeyman? No, I'm just saying, why am I going to go up against a guy who was coming for George St. Pierre's stuff 2 fights ago, has had one bad night at the office, really were like, Leon, want to fight against him. Okay. Had a bad moment where he got head kicked. One of the most shocking moments in the sport's recent history. But before that was maybe this guy was going to be the welterweight GOAT. Khamzat Chimaev got all he can handle from Gilbert Burns. And I love Gilbert. That's, a guy, Gilbert's near and dear to my heart, but come on, dude. That's the legit only contender he's ever taken on. Okay. Kevin Holland.
Let me ask you something real quick. Screw your heart, because it's betting sports radio. Where's your money that night? You feel strongly enough to put your hard-earned money?
It's on Usman. It's a pick'em fight. It's on Usman. Hell yes.
Exact opposite of Jake. I love it, man. I love it.
And in fact, I'm going to wait it out, because I bet you there's a lot of people who feel like Jake, and I bet you that Usman's a dog by fight night, and you bet your ass it's going on the Nigerian Nightmare. Are you kidding me? What are we talking? What are we talking about?
But that was more convincing than your argument. I think I have to take Usman on the money line. And I do tend to agree with what you said. A lot of the public money will come in on the other side. Everybody want to see that monster go out there, Chimaev, and win the fight. It's tough to bet against Usman. All right, we got a lot of stuff to get to on the other side, because 294 completely scrambled the eggs with us. If you're just now tuning in, where you been? Volkanovski versus Islam, now the main event. Paulo Costa out against Khamzat Chimaev. Nigerian Nightmare, and Usman versus Chimaev. What a card UFC 294 has become. And to echo your point earlier, this is way better than what we're about to get. Sometimes this just happens. This is the card of the year, at least on paper. That's Jake. That's Brendan. I'm the Sports Machine. Coming up next, we talk more fighting. We make more money. I'm Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
Tapped Out, rolling along. However you're checking us out, we appreciate it. If it's on the Odyssey app, YouTube, whatever, good to have you along with us. That's Brendan. I'm the Sports Machine. Man, we got a lot of stuff going on. No time to waste. And some breaking news as we speak about USADA and their relationship going forward, no longer at the beginning of the new year with the UFC. First, more guys out, BT. Curtis Blades out of UFC Sao Paulo's main event against Jailton Almeida. That guy's a killer. You saw who replaced him? The Black Beast, Derek Lewis, coming off of, maybe one of my favorite Derek Lewis fights. You're making faces. You don't like the matchup against Curtis Blades for the Black Beast?
I don't like Jailton Almeida for the Black Beast. No, I think that's a tough fight for him. I mean, yeah, he's a tough fight. He's a tough fight for anybody right now. But the thing that makes me happy with Derek Lewis is he did just recently get a win. So he, like I said with him, all I need Derek Lewis to do for my happiness and sanity, win one out of every 4 fights. You be a 250 hitter, and I'm good. Just keep him around. I love the UFC having the Black Beast. Put him in there, contender, and fringe young guy who's trying to make a name for himself. Knock him out. We do it all over again.
I'm not looking for Tony Gwynn here. He doesn't need to hit, 370 or anything, but Can you hit 275 maybe? Can you win like close to 3 out of 10 fights? Anyway, I'm with you. And I was wrong. I love the Black Beast. Petr Yan out, UFC China main event against Song Yadong. Looking for a replacement for that one. Dude, did you see Francis Ngannou accidentally break that shop door? So, you know what I'm talking about? Have you seen this highlight?
Yeah. Yeah, it was crazy. Okay. I was actually confused for a second.
I've seen it real quick. Let me set it up real quick. So it looks like he's walking up to a general kind of shop that is locked, right? And it has the 2 giant glass doors with the window panes. And tell me if you saw something different. He doesn't punch the windows or anything. It almost looks like he shakes the door handle so hard that he's Francis Ngannou, and it shattered like a Shaquille O'Neal backboard back in the day. That's what I saw.
Yeah, it was crazy. And it was funny. I didn't know at first. I was like, I don't think this is real, because I don't know if you saw the commercial for Tyson Fury, Francis Ngannou that got released this week, but it's awesome. And it's basically, they're basically training in different parts of the world, but everything that they hit basically causes an earthquake for wherever the other person is. So like Francis is hitting a sledgehammer to the floor while Tyson Fury is in England doing karaoke, and the roof starts rattling because Francis is training. Then Francis is enjoying a bubble bath, and the bathroom gets all ruined because Tyson Fury's throwing a medicine ball. It's an awesome commercial, an awesome buildup. I really am excited for that matchup, even though I think it's going to be a bad fight. I'm just excited for the spectacle of it. So I thought at first this was just like an outtake. I thought this was like part of the bit. I thought that Francis was just, this must have been something they didn't use. But no, apparently he's just a behemoth. He broke this guy's shop. Then apparently once he realized who it was, he realized better publicity if I just take a picture with him.
For the record, I'm a huge bubble bath guy. Huge bubble bath guy. I'm telling you, when it gets cold out here in the Midwest, and I'm talking about the old school stuff, the pink bottle, the Mr. Bubbles, a little bit of that stuff, and water as hot as it gets. Anyway, too much information. Tapped Out here. BetQL Network, Brendan Tobin, Sports Machine, Sean Levine. Appreciate you checking us out. More fights. Ricky Simone versus Mario Bautista on January 13th. Ricky Simone, what do we think of him? Because for a minute, I thought he was going to be good enough to be champion. I'm not sure I still feel that way.
I still think that's a possibility for him. I think for him, it's like, he's still only just 31 years old. That's not old in fighter years for sure. And you're one of these guys that's in that stacked weight class. Tough loss time around to Song Yadong. Song Yadong has been really, really good, but before that was on an absolute steamroll. So this is a good chance for him to get back into the win column.
The fights roll on. Rude Boy Randy Brown versus Muslim Salikov at UFC 296. And then, dude, we'll talk about UFC 80 recap, where I ain't gonna lie. I love Grant Dawson, and I think I said last week I was gonna bet on him, but last minute I looked at those Bobby Green odds, and I ended up getting almost 5-1 on my money at BetMGM. I think I got plus 460 when the fight went off. And then I started driving, and I figured, all right, I'll miss the first round, but this thing will at least get to the second. And Bobby Green's talking smack in the octagon by the time I get home, and I get to cash my ticket. So we'll talk about that here in just a minute. First, what's going on with USADA? So USADA, who's been with the UFC now, ultimately deciding if their fighters are clean or not, with Olympic-type testing for years, is going to be no longer. Is that right?
Yeah, this is wild. So, like, in the midst of Wednesday, late afternoon, like, they announced that they have confirmed Conor McGregor is in the testing pool as of October 8th, I think it was.
Oh,
so,
man, yeah.
Like, less than a week. And then they followed up with, but we are no longer going to be overseeing the UFC starting January 1st, 2024. So like the whole thing of it was they did not want to give an exemption to Conor McGregor, which basically you got to give 2 negative tests, 6 months of testing. And, Conor very clearly, I think to the eyeballs of any sane person looks at, we all see his physique. We know that he's coming back from a terrible injury. Seems like he hasn't even really denied that he may be.
A little bit of Bear Bonds, a little bit of Roger Clemens.
Yeah. I don't even think Conor's denying. I don't even think Conor's denying it. And so there were some talk like, hey, we want to have Conor fight before the year. Can we do an exemption? No exemption. So apparently they were saying in their statement that they were having good productive negotiations in the middle of the year to renew with the UFC. And then all of a sudden, because of statements by UFC brass, they were like, this has become an untenable situation. And we are not going to continue with the UFC. So basically feels like the Conor McGregor situation has completely set a grenade off. There's not going to be USADA anymore. And really, Conor doesn't have to be in the drug testing pool because really what's the point if they're going to be gone by January anyway? And, by my count, that's 3 months away, so if he did want to come back in January, that's half the testing pool and it doesn't really matter because they're going to be gone anyway. So yes, it appears very much like Conor McGregor got USADA thrown out the door.
It really does. You have to wonder what's going on behind closed doors. You have to wonder what they're going to put in now. There's got to be some. It's not just going to be a free for all. There's going to be some sort of a system. How can it be better than USADA? That's probably the most interesting question right now. Do they maybe end up reworking this marriage? Because it seemed like, you wouldn't just want Conor McGregor to be the one that screws this whole thing up, even though that's definitely happened before. Very interesting with USADA and the UFC and all that. So we'll have to see exactly what happens going forward.
And it's also one of these things too, like, let's not forget, USADA was brought into place when the UFC was going to get sold. Part of the whole reason is they didn't want to be looked upon as some freak show that was allowing.
How long were we talking about?
Vitor Belfort in there with looking like the Incredible Hulk at his age. And they were trying to sell their company, get TV rights deals, seem like a legitimate sport that wasn't a free-for-all with drugs all over the place. So all that stuff now, man, look, there's no way Disney's not happy with what they've gotten from them. There's no way that, WME is going to start looking at, or TKO, whoever the hell owns them. Vince McMahon owns them. Whoever the hell owns them now doesn't realize how valuable they are. So what do they need USADA for anymore? And especially if USADA is going to prevent the biggest stars from being in there. And, our arguments are going to be, of course, well, what about the natural competition of it? And then you're like, yeah, but you don't get to see John Jones. Oh, man, that's a good point. So it's like, how many people actually want this around, that don't want their fights ruined by it? And it hasn't been, definitely, I can't say they haven't done a good job, because it feels like, at a time people felt like they were getting suspended every week for USADA. Now it definitely feels like that's a pretty rare occurrence as compared to what it used to be. But with this Conor McGregor thing, man, I think we all could see it with our own eyes. Didn't even need testing to see that Conor McGregor clearly was either juicing or using some performance enhancer or healing enhancer to get himself back to fighting shape. And I think this is an interesting landscape changer for the sport, because what does it mean for everybody else if they're not going to be there?
It was 2015. I had to look it up that the UFC and USADA partnered up. That became the first professional league that the USADA kind of oversaw when it came to their drug testing. I don't want to put words in your mouth. So you're cool with this free-for-all? You're like, oh, Conor McGregor looks huge and screw USADA. We don't need it anymore and let everybody go out there. Because, like, I go back to the baseball steroids era, and there was always the argument, if you're a hitter, well, a lot of the pitchers are on it. So I'm just trying to level out the playing field. Then you'd also have the human side of it, right? My grandma would chime in and be like, steroids aren't good and there's going to be some bad health. It sounds like you're ready just to go let them do whatever they want and throw them in the octagon, like almost back to UFC 1.
I think it's tough. I mean, like, look, there's definitely some element to the way we react to these things. I think the guy who's really probably gotten skewered the most of it hasn't even been John Jones, probably TJ Dillashaw, right? The guy who's got probably one of the biggest roid scarlet letters around him. We know the other guys from the former era, even Anderson Silva. Like, look, Anderson Silva got caught using, full-blown steroids, and everybody was like, nah, but he's still the GOAT. So it is interesting.
We turn a blind eye.
It's interesting who we actually get outraged for. And I don't know. I mean, like, it's such an interesting thing, man, because, we went through a point where guys were getting popped for picograms, and maybe the system got too good, or, they got busted for supplements.
That's roids. We did the same thing with baseball. Remember, like, Andy Pettit took the roids? It's fine. Put him in the Hall of Fame. He's a nice guy. Barry Bonds, no chance. This is what we do.
Right. But the difference is they're hitting baseballs. These guys are hitting each other in the brain.
And you're saying let him do it, it sounds like. That's what's crazy.
I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying, like, look, Conor McGregor's a powerful guy. And like, it is what I think the interesting question is like, if Michael Chandler knew, assuming Michael Chandler's clean, if Michael Chandler knew Conor McGregor was juiced to the gills, would he still want to fight him? And I'd say probably.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting question. And I think that Michael Chandler, in a moment of clarity, would tell you, of course he knows. The same thing that the same thing with anybody with at least one eyeball, in the case of Michael Bisping, can see that, of course, this guy's been on something. Now, to be fair, it's his own life, and if you're outside of the USADA pool, do your thing. But from my perspective, once you come back, I've had no problem. I would rather have, maybe this comparison works, maybe it doesn't. I like over replay in the NFL. Even if it takes a little bit of time, let's get it right. You know what I mean? Like, I would rather know that everybody's clean than just say, look, if Conor McGregor wants to be dirty, then everybody can go ahead and be dirty. That just doesn't feel right.
I think the thing that's fascinating, look, everybody talks a lot of Conor who covers MMA, right? It's fascinating that he still has this much power, that he has this much influence.
That's
still.
crazy. He's almost done. He stinks.
Doesn't win, not a champ. Hey, you said it, not me. But he still has this much kind of cachet that probably is hobnobbing with the billionaire owners at TKO and is like, hey, what's holding us up here from you fighting? Oh, USADA. USADA? Get that out of here.
Who?
They want to hang with Conor McGregor and be at a Conor McGregor fight, dude.
You're probably right. Isn't that crazy? What a wild world we live in. If Conor McGregor wants to use steroids and doesn't want USADA around, we'll just get rid of USADA. He said a long time ago that he runs this whole thing. And for a couple of years there, I was like, you know what? He kind of does. And now we're back to it. I guess he does. All right, let me go over this real quick. Bobby Green knocked out Grant Dawson in round 1. Ended up getting paid on that one. Joe Pyfer sub INM by knockout over Abdul Razak Al Hassan. That came in round 2. A couple of finishes on that card in UFC 80. Joaquin Buckley by unanimous decision over Alex Morano. Drew Dober knocked out Ricky Glenn. Drew Dober's a problem. And Bill Algeo, unanimous decision over Alexander Hernandez. We talk more fighting. We make more money coming up next. In fact, let's fight each other. It's Tapped Out.
Sean Levine will step into the cage with Brendan Tobin in Are You Gonna Fight Me?
I'm gonna fight your ass!
Here on Tapped Out.
That's right, fight me like a man!
Only on the BetQL network.
You know the rules. I want a good, clean fight. When I tell you to break, I want you to step back out my command and break. Now go back to the corner and come out fighting at the bell.
Tapped Out, right here, BetQL Network, on YouTube, on the Odyssey app. However you're checking us out, I'm checking you out back. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. USADA, we were talking about this a little earlier, is going to be no longer going forward. It seems like Conor McGregor essentially got that whole thing thrown out. You're going to fight me if I say Conor McGregor's most memorable fight is Nate Diaz 1. And I'll even give you the order. I think the most memorable is Nate 1, followed by Khabib, then Nate 2, and then Eddie Alvarez. You going to fight me?
Yeah, I mean, his most notorious moment is knocking out Jose Aldo in 13 seconds. It's the silliest thing. You don't even have that in the top 3?
Okay, well, I forgot that one, to be fair, but I still wouldn't have that over.
What?
Would you? You'd have that over Nate 1?
Dude, that's like, that should be his logo. Yeah, like, what are we talking about? Conor McGregor, the buildup of Conor McGregor being stamped and hitting the crescendo, knocking out Jose Aldo, your beloved featherweight GOAT, in 13 seconds with the step back bang, southpaw right down the pipe. Yeah, what are you talking about?
I swear to God, dude, the only person that loves, like, I bet Conor McGregor's watched that 10,000 times and can tell you exactly where his feet were and where his knuckles were and where the clock was. He can tell you everything. I think you're next. And I love that moment too. But man, like, you love that knockout. It's almost like, and I feel kind of weird saying this because you don't want to say this about any athlete, especially a fighter. What if that didn't happen? We would have been introduced to Conor in a different moment at some point, right? He still had all these great moments, these great knockouts. That one was just so quick. It was just so quick. We got so much more time with the Nate fights, and he was so good against Eddie. I love the Jose Aldo one, and shame on me for not putting that at or near the top. But man, is that your? If I ask you your favorite all-time UFC moment, is that it? Like frozen in time? Is that it?
I wouldn't say it's my favorite moment, but I would say, for the reason why Conor McGregor seems to have the pull of getting a drug testing organization canned, is because of moments like that. Because I think that is, I was still a big UFC fan going into that. But that's like, dude, the buildup, then the fact that the fight got scrapped, then he fought Chad Mendez, and he was terrorizing Jose Aldo around the world. And then for the end of that rivalry to be, I knock you out in 13 seconds and take your championship, when I had all the pressure, all the hype, I did all that bleep talking, and he did it with that. I mean, dude, what gets better than that in sports?
I'll bet you a burn-in special at Q39 Barbecue here in Kansas City that I can name your favorite UFC moment of all time.
Sure.
Masvidal kneeing him to the face. That has to be it, right? That's your moment.
To be honest with you, that's not even my favorite. That's not even, that Masvidal knockout was really cool. But to be fair, I was at one of my best friend's weddings at that, so I had to watch that on a terrible pirate feed on my phone. So I like way to do it. I know, but like I think him knocking out Darren Till was actually, I like that one better. I thought that was because Darren Till was kind of still a monster. A lot of people didn't think he was coming off of it was a big break for Masvidal coming off of that too. So I did like the flying knee, don't get me wrong, but I loved his knockout against Darren Till.
Are you gonna ask me mine?
Sure.
Weidman against Anderson Silva. If you ask me just one, absolutely. Yeah. It just, I know that was as much Silva playing around as it was Weidman. Obviously, Weidman backed it up, so it's all good. We know it was real. But just, you know what happens, man, in this sport? When you see a certain guy or gal go down, it just, your eyes, it feels like are lying to you. I didn't ever think I'd see that with Anderson Silva. When it happened, I'm pretty sure I broke my TV screen.
Let me flip it on you. You're going to fight me when I say Chris Weidman calling out Khamzat Chimaev before the Usman fight was announced was the craziest idea I've ever heard in my life.
Yeah, in the case of Chris Weidman, that's a terrible idea, dude. Yeah,
terrible idea.
I wouldn't do that. That's not the guy you want to get in. I don't know if you want to get in there with anybody, but that's not the guy you want to get in there with right now. We talk about the Black Beast coming back, steps up on short notice again. He's an absolute animal. We love that guy. Best celebration in the sport, even better than the Shoey. You're going to fight me if I say, even though his record's not great, it's good, but not great, he's definitely a future Hall of Famer.
Oh, yeah, I think so. He's, look, the one thing I love about the sport is it's not necessarily all about greatness. We do a lot of talk on this show about GOAT and all that stuff, and those things are cool. But the thing that makes this sport awesome is there's still a lot of love in the hearts of people for the Derek Lewises, the Jorge Masvidals, the Donald Cerrones of the world, the Uriah Fabers, who maybe never got to the pinnacle. Yeah, maybe never got to the pinnacle, but there's no way I'm not watching those guys fight. I mean, hell, we still talk about every Tony Ferguson fight, and the guy hasn't been relevant in a long time, or hasn't gotten a win in a long time. And for me, I think that's one of the great things about the sport is that they still, if you're entertaining and you are real like that, there's still just a special place. Jim Millers of the world, Joe Lozons, like guys like that, they're still just as beloved, even the so-called goats of the sport.
Oh, I still watch a favorite fight once a week if I'm feeling down. His walkouts in Sacramento early in his career, just unbelievable. Speaking of fun walkouts, Sean O'Malley, Chito Vera, it looks like that's the fight that we're going to see again. I think there's a really good chance that Chito wins the fight when we see it again. You going to fight me?
Yeah, because I just haven't liked the way he's fought recently. That's kind of my bigger issue with Chito. It's not necessarily a case of his ability. It's just a case of I just feel like his octagon IQ hasn't really been great in his recent performances. I feel like he doesn't really know when to get on the gas. I think he's always kind of going for the home run cut. And I think that's a bad recipe against Sean O'Malley. I know he's, had success against him in the past, but I feel like Sean has been going on an incline, and I feel like Chito Vera has almost been like on a roller coaster.
Isn't that always how Cheeto's fought, though? I understand what you're saying. He's a slow starter. He waits a little while to get going. Every now and again, he has Tyrone Woodley syndrome. We know what that means. You just can't let the hands go. That's kind of who he is. And then he kicks you in the head or chokes you out. That's why I think Chito can win the fight again. I wouldn't be surprised if it looks a lot like the first time around.
I mean, look, that'd be really cool because I think the idea of Chito Vera, I mean, we've had him on the show multiple times. I mean, one of the realest, coolest dudes out there. He's one of those guys. He's one of those guys you would love to see become champion, but if he doesn't, I think he's going to be in that category of just love the style of which he went about things, love the way that he carries himself, love that he'd been in the UFC that long and kind of had this Renaissance star rise that he's had. But I feel like, man, he's gotten a little too, because in that Sean fight, he didn't fight like that. I felt like in that fight, he was kind of bringing it the entire time. And then, this one, it's just been like, he's always looking for that perfect shot for the head kick and stuff. And look, sometimes it works and it's always sensational. You remember his fights, but it's given me concerns for a few fights now.
Speaking of friend of the show, one of my favorite interviews that we've ever done, and we brought on everybody at this point, was with Wonderboy Thompson. And unfortunately, his opponent missed weight. So Wonderboy said, screw it, I ain't fighting you. And then he signed on the dotted line against Shavkat Rakhmonov. You're going to fight me if I say the most likely way this thing finishes is with Wonderboy getting knocked out.
I mean, look, I love him. The most likely way it finishes, the only thing I'd fight you on is or submission, because you don't know with Shavkat. All right, that man will go get you however he has to get you, even when he doesn't have to get you. He did Jeff Neal so dirty because he had that fight won. He didn't have to go for the finish. And no, he still went standing choke, took him out just because I got to stay perfect on finishing. That's what kind of an assassin he is. I love watching Shavkat fight. I think, it's kind of crazy how, the way we look at Khamzat Chimaev and all the hype that he gets, and look what Shavkat's done. And I don't feel like he gets a third of the buzz that Khamzat does, because if you told me what Jake was talking earlier, he thinks Khamzat's he's going to steamroll Usman. I'll tell you what, I'd be more worried if Usman was going in there against Shavkat than I would be against Hamzat.
I think Shavkat wears the better hat. I've called it a rat hat before. You said that was disrespectful. What is it made out of? Mink? What is it?
Yeah. I don't know if it's mink or fox. It's just beautiful.
Fox. Whatever it is, it's not a rat hat. The funny thing is, I tried to find one of those hats because I thought it would look good on me. And let's be honest, pretty much everything would. But I thought, and so I Googled rat hat. Apparently they don't exist. Or at least one didn't come up in my search box. A bunch of you could get a Ratatouille hat with that rat if you wanted. But I couldn't find me an actual rat hat.
I see
Ian
a
Gary,
red fox fur Mongolian Kazakhstan hat.
I don't got the money for that thing. How much?
200.
Yeah, unless you're getting me one for my birthday in December, which I'd really appreciate. That'd be a great gesture. I don't think I can fork over 200. What's it made out of?
Fox, dude.
Fox. Okay. Yeah, they make good hats.
It's kind of good looking.
Fox. All right. Well, get it for yourself. Ian Gary. I think he's a future champion. Is it fair to say you're going to fight me if I say he's kind of turning into what Darren Till was supposed to be?
I almost feel like it's a disservice to Ian because I think Ian is, one thing I do like about Ian, I don't really know what he's doing with his character lately because I feel like 1 minute he's, boy wonder, all, wholesome, and then now he's Conor McGregor light and he's talking bleep. But I do like the fact that he is going all around. He is he is trying to sharpen up his tools with a lot of different camps. I think that's good for a guy of his age. But hey, look, man, he is super talented. He is super talented. I don't know when that move is going to be that he makes the run for the title, but we got some really, really thrilling talent at welterweight. That's for sure.
And we got some really great fights on the horizon, right? UFC 81 coming up this weekend. Super Sadiq Youssef back in the octagon against one of the best finishers of all time, Edson Jr. Barbosa. And UFC 294 is right around the corner. And it's not what we thought it was going to be. But now that we've had a little bit of time to think about it, I've got some winners for you coming up on the other side. Keep it right here on Tapped Out.
We're back with more Tapped Out with Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine on the BetQL Network.
All right, it is time to tap out here on Tapped Out. That's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. Time for best bets. Let's make some money. UFC 81 on Saturday night. Sadiq Youssef in the main event, minus 165 against Edson Barboza at plus 140. Barboza can knock you out in a million different ways. I like it when he wraps his shin around guys' heads. Edson Barboza at plus 140 looks way too good to be true.
Yeah, I mean, like, look, he's coming off of a really sensational knockout, and he has a ton of those in his careers against Billy Q, that knee up against the cage, probably an argument for one of the knockouts of the year. I mean, that's so I think with him in a 5-round fight, if you're getting like 2-1 on Edson Barboza by TKO, you're always like, yeah, he's going to find it at some point. Super Sadiq, though, look, I mean, his only UFC loss is to Arnold Allen. I mean, this guy has had a lot of success. Arnold Allen is no slouch. But I too, I like the value in Barboza. I think that, him getting his swagger back a little bit with that knockout late, I think that he could do that again. And, I also just have trouble betting against him. He's one of my faves. Who doesn't love Edson Barboza?
Right? That Barboza knee, by the way, I know it because I was there when he knocked out Billy Q in Kansas City. Jennifer Maia in the co-main event against Viviane Araújo, plus 125 for Araújo. I'm not surprised that Jennifer Maia is a minus 150 favorite. In fact, I'm a little bit surprised that I only have to pay minus 150 for Maia in this fight.
Yeah, I'm with you on that one. I think with her, she's got the roll going in this one against Vivian. I think she keeps it going.
No question about that. We're on the same page there. Christian Rodriguez on this card also. Michelle Pereira versus Andre Petrosky. Let's spend the last couple of minutes of the show talking about UFC 294 because this thing has been completely tipped on its side. Now, one fight that we haven't talked about that's still on the main card is Magomed Ankalaev, a minus 330 favorite against Johnny Walker at plus 270. Walker's one of those guys over the years that I've made a lot of money on. And it's tough to bet against those guys. It's tough to either bet against or not to bet on them at all, especially when he's a plus 270 underdog. And look, I get it. When Johnny Walker looks bad, he looks terrible. We've seen him get knocked out and crumpled up in some really memeing, is that a word? Positions to be put into a meme, if you get my drift here. I don't think he's that guy anymore. I think that he's figured that out. I think we've seen that recently. And I'll take it one step further. I think Johnny Walker knocks out Magomed Ankalaev.
I don't know, dude. Like, look,
excited? I got a little excited.
A little too fried. Look, if you're gonna do it, I'd sprinkle a little. I don't know if I put the mortgage on it. Just Ankalaev is not exciting. I get it. I mean, hell, the guy bored the president of the company basically of booting him out of a title fight. He was mad at him. So I almost feel like that's got to be some kind of a wake-up call to Magomed. He is really, really talented. No, he's not the most thrilling dude in the world, but he doesn't have a lot of holes. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. And so that's, I think, why you see him at the number that he's at. I would say most likely he's going to probably still go out and win a decision. I would be surprised if he goes and pulls the trigger because it's just not in his nature. He likes to keep these fights usually at a distance. He usually likes to just go out there and basically – find the safest path to victory. I think if Johnny Walker's going to do it, he's going to have to press the action. He's going to have to do something to get Magomed into a firefight. I just don't know if he can do that. I don't think he can do board.
Maybe he finds his chin and knocks him out. Look, it's going to, dude, on fight night, that's going to pay us like 7-8 to 1 on our money. And it's going to be fun when Johnny Walker puts him down. Co-main event. You couldn't find two more opposite guys though. Like Johnny Walker's going to make your screen pregnant. He's going to do gyrations. Magomed Ankalaev, like it's literally like the UFC version of playing chess. Like that's what he's going in there doing. Like I think Ankalaev would have more fun if they put a chessboard actually in the middle of the octagon and he got to play against himself and hit the clock and to the other side and hit the clock and go to the other side and make chess. I think he would enjoy that more than Johnny Walker's shenanigans. We get it. You think he's a boring fighter. Dana thinks he's a boring fighter. I actually like the chess analogy. I appreciate it. Although That's a little bit why I'm surprised that Johnny Walker's a plus 270, because who's going to want to bet on this boring fighter, Magomed Ankalaev, and pay minus 330 for it when you can get Johnny Walker, who everybody likes watching win fights, at plus 270. Anyway, we'll talk about it next week when the fight's a little bit closer. Co-main event was supposed to be Khamzat Chimaev versus Paulo Costa. Costa out. Now it's Khamzat versus Kamaru Usman. We talked about this early on in the show. It's a pick'em right now. The one thing we agreed on is I think a lot of money ends up coming in on Chimaev on fight night.
I agree with you. I think especially with the build-up and the fight week and the stare downs, I think there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be putting their money on Khamzat. And I get it. Like, the guy has gotten a hype train behind him. The guy has gotten a lot of people buzzed and interested in what he does. And there's a little bit of air of mystery, a little bit of sinister to him. So I think that's good for him. And I do think it's going to influence the public. So if you do like Kamaru Usman, my suggestion would be to hold off, because my thought would be, as we get into fight week, the lines are going to shift to Khamzat Chimaev.
Totally agree with everything you said, which is typically not something that I like to do. So let's move on to the main event. Well, we've got a couple of minutes left here on Tapped Out. Islam Makhachev versus Charles Oliveira was supposed to be the fight. And I told you 20 separate times on this here show that I thought that Oliveira was going to win the fight. Well, he can't win the fight anymore because he's out. Did you see the gash, by the way? The reason that he's out on his eyebrow,
yeah.
I think it was deep and nasty. Anyway, so now we get Islam versus Alexander Volkanovski, and the odds are much closer, right? You're going to get something on fight night like Islam at minus 140, 160. Maybe you get Volkanovski at plus as much as 150, maybe 2-1, depending on what the public bets that night. I tend to think that since they've fought 5 rounds, that favors Alexander Volkanovski, right? I mean, and I'm not saying that Islam doesn't have experience. He's one of those guys that's been fighting out the crib. But when you want to talk about experience fighting different type of fighters in the UFC octagon, Volkanovski gets the advantage there. He's seen every different type of fighter, and now he's actually seen Islam, and I thought that he won 3 of those rounds. I mean, what I'm doing is talking myself into betting Volkanovski on this fight again, no matter what the odds go off at.
Yeah, man. And look, I got to be honest with you. I feel almost like I was late to the Volkanovski train, probably because I was such a big Max Holloway fan, but I think in a weird way, he's the closest thing we have to Khabib since Khabib. I feel like he's getting better every time he goes out there. I do think that he got the short end of this decision. I agree with you there. And the odds are still really good if they do stick at this number. This is the one where I'm actually wondering, in the other way, where we were talking about with Usman, I feel like if you wait it out and be patient, I feel like you're going to get a better number on Usman. I almost wonder if this is the best it's going to be on Volk, because I do think that a lot of people are going to be like, oh, wait, I can get Volkanovski at what? And pounce on it. So that's going to be something I'm interested to see during fight week, to see. It's also could be one where, you know, maybe the way people look during the media week will sway them. But I feel like the best money you're going to get on Volk is early. And then when the closer we get, people are going to pounce on him and his number's going to get lower, because they're going to be like, I can get Alexander Volkanovski I never get Alexander Volkanovski at that number. And I think you're good. Go ahead.
I was going to say, let me give you a scenario before we get out of here when it comes to Volkanovski, as we both wax poetic about him. So he's 26-2 in his career with 5 title defenses. You got John Jones at 27-1 with the asterisk on the 1 with 13 title defenses. What if John goes out there against Stipe, doesn't look great, and Stipe ends up finishing the fight, and then John says, that's it, I'm done, I retire. And Volkanovski goes out there and beats up on Islam. At that point, could there ever be any crossover where we say Volkanovski's the better fighter than John Jones?
No.
Okay. All right. How do you really feel?
But he could pass him currently for pound, obviously. I think that he could, you know, that they've kind of had that stupid tie lately because they just can't decide, like, oh, he's pound for pound number 1. No, he's pound for pound number 1. I think that
you're willing to go out on a limb and say that if one of them won and one of them lost, that would separate them. That's what you're willing to go out on, huh? All right.
Currently, yeah. I mean, like, if you want to say who's going to be currently pound for pound number one on the planet, yeah, Volk can overthrow that. But are you going to tell me, is that going to dethrone John's GOAT status because he lost to Stipe? And Volkanovski beat Islam Makhachev, who's been around for 3 seconds? No, that's not going to do it for me.
Can the win, if that was to happen, could it put Volk up on the Mount Rushmore, perhaps, where I think we've got John up there, we've got GSP, and then it's either Anderson Silva or Khabib, in my opinion. Take your pick. I think it could.
I think Khabib's the more interesting topic. I think Khabib's the guy that I think he dethrones. Like, I think we were a little too obsessed with Khabib's undefeated record. If he goes and wins belts in 2 weight classes, and 2 of the more difficult weight classes too. You know, one of the things that I think, here's what I mean with John spanned eras. Yeah, it was mostly just in 1 weight class, but like, he dominated the TRT era. He dominated the non-TRT era. He then won the heavyweight championship. He's been doing this since he was a child. Volkanovski definitely reigned over featherweight and definitely got the better of, which will mostly be known for he was better over Max Holloway. But then if he goes and wins it, the lightweight division, not a long reigning champion or a dominant champion. I mean, Islam's had the belt for a short amount of time. I think that's enough to say, hey, this guy better than Khabib. You know, shouldn't we give him the nod? But he can't do it. But John, GSP, I don't think he can dethrone that yet. He'd still need to do some more stuff.
I agree that my question was somewhat laughable about John. That being said, if the cards fall right, I think they could finish 1 and 2, not just now, but all time. Like, I think he could catch GSP. I think that I agree with you. He has maybe already surpassed Khabib. Anderson Silva is an interesting one because if you look at his record at the end, it was a little bit dicey, but you and I don't really care about stuff like that. We look more at his prime and his title defenses and all those things. So there's a lot of debate when it comes to that, which makes this thing all the more fun. All right, we'll catch you this time next week right here on Tapped Out. Good night.